pray, Lord, that you'd bless it, that your people would be blessed, Lord, and that through their natural prosperity, that they could bless other people in this world, Lord.
Yes.
We love you, Father. We thank you for all your gifts, and we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I'm going to start with what the young people know as my favorite scripture. So this is Matthew 6:30 to 34. I'll just quickly read it, although I'm sure it's seared into many people's minds by now. Wherefore, if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. And I'll give my standard quick blurb about this. I don't believe God is saying don't think about tomorrow. My personal revelation on this is don't be consumed about the thoughts of tomorrow. Don't let your mind constantly be worrying about your future. And one of the ways to do that is to set up your financial security. Because, anybody who's had a bill due and who knows they don't have the money to cover that bill, you know how awful that feels and what kind of anxiety twists at your stomach while you're waiting for that due date. And it's a horrible feeling. And you're not a worldly person because you're vexed about this problem. It's real. So my hope is that with the right principles in place, any income level can find a way to manage and plan for their future. Oh, I guess I have a pointer now. Yay. Okay, so just a couple more scriptures really quickly, because I want to make sure we're starting on the right foot. God expects us to be stewards of his blessings. So Matthew 25, verse 14 to 19 is the parable of the man who was giving the talents to the different servants. And one invested them wisely, and two invested them wisely, and one did not. And the one was rebuked. So my thought is just make the most of what God has given you, regardless of how small it may seem. Because God doesn't measure us based on the size of the talent we're given. He measures us based on how we use what we are given. And I think that's a really important key. Luke 16:10 is the scripture, he that's faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in least is also unjust in much. So we are accountable to God with how we use what he gives us. And I think that it's going to be hard to answer with how did you spend all these gifts and talents that I gave you if you cannot show that you gave anything back to the Lord. So I want to be mindful of that as well. And Galatians 6:7-8 is, be ye not deceived, God is not mocked. What a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So be intentional with your resources, your money, time, wealth, all of your gifts, because as you sow, so shall you reap. That's kind of a tongue twister. So I just want us to be, especially the young people, as you're getting into your careers and into even your high school time, you reap what you sow. So if you're have a huge test or a deadline next week and you're not sowing any investment of time into studying, you might not reap a great reward, and then your parents will be very wroth. Okay, last set of scriptures here. So I want to make sure that we understand that getting rich is not the goal. I don't think there's anything wrong with being rich. Just let me say that. There was plenty of rich people in the Bible. Solomon was the wealthiest man on earth. I don't think God ever condemned Solomon for that. But the point of this seminar is not to teach you how to get rich or how to get rich quick. I don't believe in that personally. I think getting rich takes many, many years, or the inheritance of one really wealthy ancestor. But the scripture says in Hebrews 13:5 that comparison is the thief of joy. When it says, don't let your conversation be jealous. Be content with what you have, for he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So don't be comparing yourself to somebody else who's a few years ahead of you or who has a different skill set or has a different gift. Monetary value is not what God's looking at in everything. You know, some people have the gift of preaching or speaking or music or compassion or even like cooking and serving, hospitality. Those are all wonderful gifts that the world doesn't place a whole lot of monetary value on, unfortunately. And since, as Brother Mervyn said, our medium of exchange is currency, we always tend to value things by currency because that's the fastest way to measure. But that's not what God looks at. His currency is not inflated like ours, and he doesn't look at us that way. Matthew 6:19, lay not treasures on earth where moth corrupts and thieves steal. Lay up your treasures in heaven. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So although I said it's fine to be rich, I don't want people to think that you're, having your heart on your riches is fine, because being wealthy is one thing, but measuring yourself by that wealth is not healthy. Yes, Brother Barry.
I just have to say, what is rich?
So I think that's a very flexible, personal definition, honestly, and it depends on where you are, probably how old you are, and who you know. Because I would personally consider, like for me, I think of rich as somebody who doesn't have to consider their time for money. They can volunteer, they can do something for other people, or they can be selfish and go sit on an island all day, and no matter what they do, they will be taken care of for the rest of their life. To me, that is like ultimate wealth, where you have flexibility to do what you want. But for some people, rich is probably $1 million. And unfortunately, that will not get you to what I just described anymore anyways, not in Canada. What do you think of as rich?
Well, I just think it was mentioned it a couple times, and there's a lot of different definitions. You said that, and that's really good. And I'm certainly not here to correct, but I just wanted to maybe expound upon the thought of rich. For some people, it could be simply to have a family and a healthy family.
Right.
That goes to church and serves God. That could be great riches, but
that's a very good point.
Finances. So, I mean, what is rich? I guess, right?
Yeah. For the stream, I'll quickly summarize. Brother Barry brought up a very good point. I'm pretty single track at the moment, thinking about money. But Barry's point, I believe, is rich. You can be, there's many Psalms about being rich in the Lord and rich in family and rich in health. And rich does not always have a monetary value. So yeah, absolutely. Like, there's every single day when I think about what I'm thankful for, I give thanks to God every day. And money is never in the top 3 things that I'm thankful for. The first thing is the safety of my family. I think to live in a country where you have safety and health, and we just take it for granted, but I remind God every day of how thankful I am for that. So very, very good point. You can be rich in a whole lot of areas that have nothing to do with your bank account. Matthew 10:42, and whosoever shall give to drink unto one of the least of these my little ones, this is a different translation. And whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water only in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. So there's other investments as well. Investing in your money only is not going to get you to the goal. You need to invest in the people around you and in your community, your church. Luke 6:38, give and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give unto your bosom. For with the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. So again, I think Brother Mervyn touched on this a little bit today, is just being generous with what God has blessed you with. If God blessed you with the gift of singing, don't hold that to yourself, and don't sell it to the world for what they consider to be riches. If God blesses you financially, it doesn't mean that he wants you to just sit on an island somewhere. God calls his children to use their blessings for other people around them, especially, in my opinion, believers. But the scripture does not say to only bless believers as well. The needy, the hungry, the widows, all these people that are less fortunate. Okay. So, these are, I think, the very, very summarized concepts that I want people to come away with. So if you want to invest successfully, number one, start early, as soon as you can. Number two, you need to be diverse in your investments. Don't put all of your investments into one asset. Number three is minimize taxes and fees in your investment plan. Otherwise, you'll just constantly, where moth does corrupt and rust decay, that's taxes and fees. Mostly taxes. Be consistent in your plan. Don't be sidetracked by, Bitcoin or by whatever's trendy today, or by market ups and downs. Don't get caught up in the froth. It's not very healthy. And then finally, adapt to your phase of life. So somebody who's 13 versus 65 should have a very, very different plan and a different strategy. Okay, so when to start saving? Right now. I don't care how old you are. If you earn income, the principle of saving is what I think is so important. It's not how much money you're saving, it's the principle and the habit. So a very unfortunate statistic. These are recent statistics from the Healthcare Fund of Ontario. It's like a giant pension fund. Come on in. 40% of Canadians, these are adults, did not save anything for their retirement last year. 44% of Canadians that are less than 10 years from retirement do not have $5,000 saved. 75% have less than $100,000. So these are really scary numbers, unfortunately. And as you can see, it's the vast majority. So if you're on your way to having over $5,000 by the time you're 55, consider yourself blessed, because you're doing better than a lot of people in this country. I would like to start preparing our young people so that they have principles in place, that there's another zero added on to that $100,000 by the time they're 55 or maybe 65. Inflation is a thing we'll talk about. So numbers, when I'm going to talk about future values today, I'm going to be saying that there is no inflation. I'm going to be pretending that there's no inflation just for the purpose of this discussion. But I want to briefly educate you. So, having $1 million in the bank used to be enough for future security about 15 years ago or so. Probably $1 million would have set you up with a middle-class lifestyle forever, because you could invest that and earn like 3 to 5% on that income, on that asset, and you could live on that 3 to 5%, like $30,000 to $50,000 for the rest of your life. You cannot do that anymore, unfortunately. Inflation over the last 3 years has averaged around 6%, 5%, something like that. Very, very high for Canada anyways. Now we're back down to 2%, which is the target for the Bank of Canada. So 2% inflation is what they want forever. So you should understand that if you're saving, $400 a month, and you save that, you think, yes, $400 a month, I'll make it to $1 million in like 40 years. You need to increase that $400 like every couple of years, because in 10 years, that $400 is only going to buy you what $350 or so bought you 10 years ago. So inflation can be a little bit weedy. I don't want to get really, really technical, but just understand that you need to gradually add to your investments over time. That is complicated to math, and I don't want to hurt our heads, and I don't have the brain for that. Brother Chris is my math guy, and he's not here. So for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to use constant values. So we're going to say that $500 today is worth the same amount in 60 years or 100 years. So all the numbers that I'm working with, I'm trying to keep them constant as if no inflation happened. What that really means, though, is you're going to have to invest more over time to make it to that level. Okay. So annual rate of return of 7%. And for this example only, I am going to show you, because I want to shock a few people and encourage others at how much you would need to save to get $1 million after inflation. I should have said what I just said after this slide. So for this calculation, this is assuming 2% inflation and that your money is going to return 7% every single year. that's not super hard to do, honestly. 7% over the course of 20 years or something is not unreasonable. So if you start saving at the age of 18, you will have $1 million by the time you're 65 if you put $620 a month. So how many 18-year-olds have $620 a month in their jeans? I think that's quite a lot of money, honestly. But keep in mind, this is after inflation. So this means that you will have $1 million in real buying power by the time you're 65. If you took out inflation, this would be closer to like 300 and something dollars. But 18 to 65 is so long, you have a long time to battle inflation, but you also have a long time to let your money grow. Going to the other edge of the spectrum, I'm sure you guys can read these numbers yourselves. I don't have to read them all out to you. But on the other side, 620 a month if you're 18 turns into 2,100 a month if you're 40, trying to reach the same goal of getting $1 million after inflation by the time you're 65. So this is called compounding interest. It means that if you put $100 in the bank today and you don't touch it, in maybe a year it'll be worth $107. But the next year, that 7% interest is going to apply on $107, not $100. So the next year, you're not going to earn $7 of interest. You're going to earn $7.25 or something. If you add zeros behind those numbers, that becomes really important. The compounding power of interest and investments. As your assets grow, they grow faster. And that's why if you see return graphs, they will often bend and get much steeper at the end of life, because the longer you wait before taking those out, those last 5 to 10 years are your highest earning years. The interest alone can be worth more than you've invested for the first 10 years, all cumulatively. So really important concepts here. So how do you start saving? Going back to our first seminar, can you see this pointer on the screen? I don't think it works on the screen. Okay, so budget for it. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Old adage, very true. The first seminar that we did, I don't know if you guys remember. Does anybody want to take a stab at where investing was in your budget plan? As far as like, you have your income, what comes off next? Tithes. What came off next? Savings. So after you've paid your tithes, you need to pay your future self. And if you do that, your future self will pat you on the back and be very, very grateful. Be nice to your future. So budget for it. If you don't budget to invest, what's going to happen is you'll probably end up spending most of your money, and then you won't have anything left to invest. So that's why I think it's critical to put that in your plan, is that, this 10% or whatever is going to go into my investment, and then you can find out how much you can afford to spend on a house. Automatic transfers, absolutely key. If I had to manually transfer money into my savings account whenever I had enough left over, I'm sure I would almost never do it. Maybe at Christmas, I would think about it. I'd be like, oh yeah, I haven't done anything this year. And I would like throw a couple $100s in Christmas and then not realize it was supposed to be a couple $100s a month for like the last 3 years. So I think automatic transfers are really, really powerful. Yes.
We all know what automatic transfers is. Can you just expound? Because that's been our number one principle.
So
we never see our paycheck piece of investment. It comes out automatically. We never see it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just expound on that a little bit? I think that's so important.
So I hope I'm getting at what you're talking about here, but like if you get paid on the first of the month, that's probably when you should have your investments coming out. And that's the way we do it. I'm self-employed, so I don't want to really use me as an example because it's not very common, but most people, you get paid maybe twice a month or something like that. On those days, you should probably have some fixed transfers that come out automatically that you can't control after that point. We also send our investments to a different institution. They're not at our primary bank because I don't want to touch them and I don't want to be tempted to touch them. Sometimes we just forget about it because the money automatically comes out. We have to live on what's left in the bank account. And so since it's automatic, there's no risk or temptation to say, oh, the car broke down. I can't invest this month. I'm going to wait till the next month. And then the fridge breaks down and then you go out for dinner too many times. So it's a much safer strategy to just start with an automatic withdrawal. You can do this through your bank itself. I might briefly touch on the literal practical steps you take, but I don't want to get too far down that road because it could be different for everybody. But this is as easy as going to your bank and saying, I want to put $500 a month into an investment, and they can help you. I don't think the bank is the best place to help you, but it's the easiest place. And if you do nothing else, from this whole seminar and you have not started investing, then just go to your bank and start it immediately, because I don't want you to take the best option but wait years to do it. It's better to start today. You can always change your investments. You can always take that money out and put it somewhere else once you get more perspective of your plan. Does that answer your question? Employee savings and investment matching. This is by far the best one. If you have an employer matched pension fund or RSP matching, something like that, they're called many different names. Crystal's, I think they match 5% of her salary. So if she invests 5% of her paycheck, they will, Sister Helen probably knows better than I do on this because but I forget what the union did right now, but I think it's 5%. You invest 5%. So say you make, this is not the real number, but it's easy. Say you make $100,000 in a year. You invest $5,000, your employer matches another $5,000. What's your return on investment in your first year? 100% return on your investment in your first year. And compounding interest applies after that. So we're going to show you an example of how strong that concept is. If you are not taking full advantage of your employer matched savings plan, please stop your other investing immediately. If you're throwing money into Bitcoin or into a savings account, whittle that down till you're fully utilizing your employer matched savings plan, because you can invest it in anything you want. You don't have to invest it into your employer's stock. They often want you to, but most of the time, I shouldn't say all the time, but most of the time they will allow you to invest in anything, and they'll match it. So it's extremely valuable. Windfalls. So, sometimes you'll get a bonus, like a Christmas bonus, or maybe you'll do an extra job on the side. So your salary is, say, $65,000 a year. I'm using $65,000, by the way, because that's what last seminar, we said the average income in Calgary, the average single earner is $65,000. So that's what I'm going to use for all these examples as well. If you make another, $1,000 a month, tithe on it, and then invest on it as well. Don't let it just go and into ice cream or something like that. Try to use that windfall to accelerate your investing and your saving. Your future self will thank you. Start now. Same as kind of previous slide. Start and end. Start now. Start now. Whatever. If you are not on a salaried job, if you're like a student and you're just making a little bit of money, I don't care. Get used to putting 10% away. For our kids, we force them. It's not a democracy in our home. They put away 10% of their income, and it's growing in a little account. And I don't know if I want Elias to hear this, but I think by the time they turn 18, they'll be able to buy a car, like almost anything they want on wheels at that age, because we are forcing them to save now. And that money is slowly growing. And by the time, 16 years after they start, maybe 14 years, we started them about 4 years old, they'll probably have enough money, and they're putting aside a little bit of their own money too. So it's just getting used to not spending everything you make. And you just get used to this concept, like, okay, I made $10 this week, but I'm not going to get to spend $10 this week. There's tithes and investing that come first, and then I can spend whatever's left over. Okay. This is the difference of using your employer matched investing plan versus not. The blue line, both of these people are investing the exact same amount of money in the exact same asset for the exact same amount of time. The only difference is the guy in the red utilized his employer matched savings plan. So the N number here, this is after 40 years of investing 10% of a $65,000 income. So 10% of $65,000 after tax, by the way, because I think it is actually pretty hard to save 10% of your pre-tax income. That's quite aggressive unless you're making good money. Anyways, that is $416 a month they're saving. After 40 years, this person made the blue, I think made 1.2 million in 40 years from only investing $416 a month. The red is 2.5 million. And the only difference is that they have an employer match savings plan. It's 100% return, guys. Do not let that go. If you're working somewhere, ask them. If you don't know, ask them. Hey, do we have any benefits like match saving plan? Sometimes they don't match 100%. When I was at BMO, they only matched 50%. But 50% return on your investment on day one, it's an absolute bargain. So do not let that go. To see if I had any notes on this one. Okay, so the next was diversification. Does anybody want to take a stab at what it means to be diverse in your investments? Or Peter?
It's just saying that don't put your egg in one basket.
Yes. So, Brother Peter says, don't put your eggs in one basket, all your eggs in one basket. So if you have a really good stock that you understand and it's powerful, like I'm going to use the example of like Apple, because most people know who Apple is, and they've done quite well over the last 10 years. So if you had only invested in Apple 10 years ago, you'd be very happy today because they have beat the market. They've done extremely well on average. They've made you a lot of money. Do you know who else was making way more than Apple? You guys won't remember this. Enron. In the turn of the century, in the mid to late 90s, Enron was printing money and almost literally, so if you owned Enron stock from like 1992 to 2000, you were so happy. In like May of 2000, that stock went to zero because the company went bankrupt. It didn't go like this and slowly wave down. It went like this and then it went bam. And everybody was caught on the ride and lost their shirt. 2008, the banking crisis, Lehman Brothers, bankrupt in a matter of like 5 days. Nobody thought that would happen. I'm not saying Apple's going bankrupt, but I'm saying that putting all of your investments into one good asset is a very, very, very risky thing to do. Maybe it doesn't go to zero. Maybe you're 5 years from retirement and then it just loses 30% of its value. And now, how do you make up 30% in 5 years? You're going to be very stressed. So I believe in picking stocks if you know what you're doing. I don't. I certainly don't. So what I think is a safer plan is to diversify and have a basket of multiple different stocks. So when I say diversification, this is not like, having Apple and Microsoft. They're in the same industry. It's not even having Apple, Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, Facebook, all those cool stocks. They're all following the same trend line. And if one goes down, they're all going to go down because it's going to be a big reason that pulls them down. Maybe government regulation changes. Maybe electricity goes to $300 a kilowatt hour or something. So maybe the robots come, who knows? But basically, if you're going to diversify, you need to have many industries. So I have a few points here. A diversified investment is many industries, many risk profiles. So some assets are like Nvidia, much more like this, risky. It's going up and down, but it's climbing fast, growth stock. Then there's stuff like Royal Bank of Canada. It's kind of been going like this, slow and steady for 50 years. So it's not growing a ton, but it's also quite safe, way less risk. You don't necessarily want all your eggs in that basket either, because then somebody else is going to outpace you and make a lot more than you in the same amount of time. So you want both. Many geographical locations. This is not as applicable if you're only investing in the United States, because the United States is the capital king of the world. But if you're only investing in Canada, I personally don't believe that that's a good idea. because Canada's market is growing much slower than the States. Also, there's overseas markets, there's Asian markets. Sometimes they're growing much faster than ours are as well. So what I'm trying to say is like a mix of everything will mean that when the market crashes, you're less likely to lose everything. And when the market explodes, you're going to rise a little bit as well. Many asset allocations. This one's a bit technical, but it's not applicable too much in your early career. It's much more when you're closer to retirement. That means like stocks is an asset type. Then there's bonds. Bonds is like debt that a company lends you, or that you lend a company. Much safer, but slower growing. Then there are like T-bills. Those are government treasuries. Those are very safe. They grow very, very slowly though. And then there's cash, which is very, very safe, but grows at like 1%. So savings accounts, basically. Oh, by the way, I didn't show this. I didn't make a graph for this, but I wanted to quickly mention, if you are saving money, but you're only putting it into a savings account, you're not investing it in the market, you're going to be further behind than that blue line. That blue line is 7% return. If you only put it in a savings account in the same period of time, you'd end up with like around 400,000. So 60% less than the person who invested in the market. So sometimes the stock market is scary, but it doesn't mean that it's actually dangerous. It's just stock picking is dangerous. If you pick one good stock, or you get a tip from a friend, that's what's really dangerous, because you could lose everything. But if you're doing what I'm going to talk about, you're not going to lose. You're not going to lose everything in the stock market unless the world comes to an end, and then we're happy, because that's actually what we all want. Okay, so the easiest way to diversify is by buying into a large pool of assets. I'm sure you've heard of mutual funds. That's what a mutual fund is. It's a fund that's mutually held by many investors. So maybe you have $1,000, maybe Bill Gates has $1 billion. You both invest in the same fund, and you are getting your cut of the whole fund. So if your money makes up 1% of the fund, you make 1% of the return. The fund is not invested in one stock. They're invested in whatever you choose. There's different categories, and this is what I don't want to get too technical in, but if you feel really good about oil and gas, there are oil and gas mutual funds that will hold many different oil and gas industry players, from upstream to service and all those different types of elements. And that's safer than just buying one stock, but you're still going to be exposed to the oil and gas market overall. Or you can buy a diverse group from everything, and that's going to be a little bit safer. But mutual funds are actively managed. There's some guy in the ivory tower making way too much money, deciding every single day how much to buy and sell for that mutual fund. So if you as an investor, you say, hey, buddy, I want 10% return on my investment. He's like, we're only at 6% this year. We've done a bad year, so I better buy and sell stuff to make more money. And then he does the wrong thing. So there's no guarantee that a mutual fund will make more just because it's managed by a smart person, but it is guaranteed that you'll pay more in fees. I'll show that soon. Exchange traded funds, these are very similar, but a completely different method. Instead of a smart guy making decisions, or girl, making decisions every day about what to buy and sell, they set a rule. So the most popular rule that most people are buying into is it's just called like the S&P 500 index, an index fund. So an ETF, exchange traded fund, the rule will be whatever is in the S&P 500, which is the 500 biggest companies in the US stock market, we are going to buy one of each of those shares. And if somebody else puts $1 million in, we're going to buy that value of each of those shares. That's their rule. They don't make a decision if the market crashes or if oil is found in Antarctica. They don't make any decisions based on that. All they do is follow the rule. So as an investor, you have to kind of make a decision. Do I like their rules, or do I want a smart guy making all the decisions? The big difference between these two is fees, and that's the rust decaying your returns, in my personal opinion. there are great mutual funds, but I'm going to show you why they might not be the best bang for your buck. Minimize taxes. This one is, I think most people understand, probably over 18. I don't think a lot of the young guys do. So I wanted to kind of go through this. Our RSP is Registered Retirement Savings Plan. It's a Government of Canada program. Other countries have it, but they're called different things. So the way this works is just as it says. Your contributions to an RSP give you a tax refund. So say you're making $65,000 in our example. Your tax rate is 30.5% in Alberta, if that's your income. That's your federal and provincial tax combined. So every $1,000 that you invest into an RSP, the government is going to say, that is $1,000 less we're going to tax you on. It's the government's way of incentivizing the public to invest. So say you made $65,000, you invest $1,000, you're going to get $305 as a refund from your tax return, or a return, a reduction technically in your tax bill. So my math here was, investing 10% of $50,000 a year. That'll come into, I think, the next example. Give me a quick sec to read what I wrote here. Yeah. Okay. So every $1,000 you invest, simple math. I'm not getting very, tax rates change every $5,000 or $6,000. Don't think about that. Just pretend it's always 30.5%. Every $1,000 you contribute to your RSP is going to reduce your taxes. This is huge if you're really smart with that return. So, you can take that $1,000 or that $305 and buy a new pair of shoes, but that is money that you had already spent. You'd already been taxed on, you'd already let it go out the door. Pretend that money is no longer yours. And when you get that tax refund, put it back into your RSP. You're gonna make much, much more over the long run. So maximize your returns by reinvesting your refund. If you get a refund, in this example, investing 10% of your $50,000 net income is $5,000 a year. So you're investing 10% per year into your RSP. You're going to get a refund of $1,525 at the end of the year when you do your taxes. And if you put that $1,525 back into your RSP, plus your $5,000 that you're investing every year anyways, your next year, you're investing $6,525. Guess what? That's higher than $5,000. And guess what? That's less taxes you're going to pay. Your next year's refund is $1,990. So if you add that to your $5,000, that's $6,900 you're investing. Do this over and over and over, and it creates the snowball effect where this can just take off. And this is, if you think about it this way, this is free return, free money, because if you think about that refund as just gone already, you've committed it to Trudeau, then when it comes back to you, if you reinvest it, it just takes off. So these are the first two examples. The yellow is remember the previous slide, the person who invested $416 a month, that's $5,000 a year, but they did not get employer matching. That's the yellow line. The red line is the smarter person who got employer matching, and they're way up here. The blue line did both of those things and then took their refund from both and put it back into the RSP. And they're at, I forget the exact number, it looks like 3.3 million. Over the course of 40 years, they made over $1 million more than the other guy did. So huge props to Brother Chris. He did the actuaries on this. I couldn't figure out the formulas. So he put this together, and I think it's amazing to think about. If you are only investing your own money, this is the difference that's possible. I unfortunately do not get this option. My employer doesn't match my RSPs. But yes, Brother Mervyn.
Okay. I mean, once you're done with that, maybe the previous slide, I just have a clarification. Maybe.
Yeah.
In what you mentioned, but 100% of returns are taxable. But if they're inside the RRSP account, then they're not taxable until you put them out.
Very, very good point. Okay. So what he's saying at the top, I said your contributions to an RSP give you a tax refund. That's what we've just been talking about. But 100% of the returns are taxable. Those are not the returns you make every year. Those are the returns when you cash out. So say for simple math, you invested $100,000 and then in 10 years, it turned into $200,000. If you take that $200,000 out, you get taxed on $200,000. So the government gives you a refund when you invest, but they kind of make their money back when you pull it out. The concept here I'll get into later as to why this is still probably a good thing for some people. And that's all about the timing and how much money you're making or how much tax you're paying now versus in retirement. Any questions? This is a relatively subtle, like not a lot of people do this, I feel. Does it make sense though? Like, does anybody have a question they want to ask about this? Okay. So the other way is, there's two really popular registered savings plans in Canada. One is your RSP, which we just talked about. There's a complete opposite, which is called your TFSA, tax-free savings account. So with this, if you invest, you don't get any refund today. You don't get any tax benefit today. So what that means essentially is you're investing after tax money. So if you made, like I showed before, you make $65,000 a year, your after-tax money is only $50,000. So the negative thing about TFSAs is you don't get a refund to maximize your investing, like an example that we just showed. The positive thing is, if you believe that your investments are going to grow and do really well over time, maybe you're going to stay in it for a very long time. Like you start investing when you're very young and you're going to let this thing ride till you're 65 or 85. You don't get taxed on a cent of your returns. So in the other example, I said for simple math, you invest $100,000, turns into $200,000. You get taxed on $200,000 when you pull it out of your RSP. Hopefully you don't do that all at once. This is just for an example's sake. That would be a very, very bad decision unless you had much more money elsewhere. With a tax-free savings account, if your 100,000 grows to 200,000, you don't get taxed on any of the returns. So you could pull out, your 100,000 could turn into $1 trillion. Probably wouldn't, but it could, and you wouldn't get taxed on any of the returns. So if you have, this might be a little bit too personal, and I'm not saying this is advice, I'm just saying this is like a strategy. If you have play money, like money that you are taking a little bit of a risk on, it's not your 10%. This is like your extra slush money that you want to just play on the stock market. Maybe you want to put $1,000 into Tesla for some reason. If you do it in a TFSA and it goes to the moon, that's probably going to be a really good tax day because those high risk assets that go up really quickly, if you time it right and sell at the right moment, you could walk away with a lot of cash and not pay any taxes on it. That's not a strategy for long-term growth though. That's like, I'm just talking about playing around. The other thing that TFSAs are great for is medium to short-term savings. I did this early in the last 4 years or whatever. I've been putting a little bit of money into a TFSA for a car. And this summer, I just pulled the money out of the TFSA when I found a car I liked and I bought the car. And I didn't pay any taxes on any of my returns. So it's nice for short to medium term investing because you don't want to do that to your RSP because you're going to trigger a tax event and that's going to minimize how much you get back. And your long-term investing, you shouldn't be touching ever until you're in your retirement years. But TFSAs can also be excellent for long-term. They kind of cover all the bases because like I said, if this is going to grow for 45, 50 years, that tax saving is massive. So I kind of recommend both in parallel. The big brain strategy here is if you think you're going to make more money now while you're investing, like if you think your tax rate's going to be higher today than it is when you retire, you should probably put more money into your RSP because you're going to be getting a bigger tax advantage today. If you think you're going to be making way more money in retirement, like you're young and you think your income is just going to grow, and by the time you retire, you're going to be in the top bracket or something, then a TFSA might be the better idea because your tax advantage is much bigger when you're in the higher tax bracket for a TFSA. Oh, sorry, if you're taking it out in your higher tax bracket. This one's pretty technical. I'm open to questions. Does anybody have any clarifications or questions about this? Just seeing some semi-glazed looks. Again, I'm just trying to trigger your memories. This is the kind of stuff, there's pretty clear information online about how these programs work, and every major bank will offer you this. You can get TFSAs and RSPs at any bank. Also, all the investing apps like Wealthsimple or Robinhood, you can get registered accounts in all of those. So this is not hard to do. It's just as hard as opening a bank account, opening an RSP. So don't let that ever scare you away from investing.
You might have it in your slide set.
Yeah.
The first home savings account, it's a combination of TFSA.
I don't have that, no. No, I don't actually understand that one very well.
So it started last year, 8,000 per year. For those who wanted to buy their first home, it will be like a TFSA, but when you withdraw, you don't need to return it to TFSA, to your RSP. Then you're not taxed at all.
So you get the RSP style benefit when you invest,
Yes.
but you don't have to reinvest it when you take it out?
You don't need to pay taxes on it when you take it out. So it's a combination.
You get both?
Yes, you have both the benefit of TFSA and
I'm
RSP.
sorry, I didn't look into this one because I'm a little bit out of touch with that.
Yeah.
So I'll have to do some research on this. What's it called?
First home savings account, FHSA.
FHSA.
Okay, so look up the FHSA if you have not bought a home yet. If you're planning to buy one.
These guys will buy it.
Yeah, no, these guys are all sitting on. They got property in Dubai. So what Brother Mervin is saying, I have not read this yet, so do your own research. But he's saying that like if you invest, you get the tax benefit today of an RSP where you get a deduction on your taxes. But when you take the money out to buy your first home, you also don't get taxed on the returns. That sounds like a win-win-win to me. If you're saving up for a home, you should probably be doing that.
And the limit is 8,000.
8,000 a year is what you can put in.
Started 2023.
Otherwise, before, if you have an RSP and you want to withdraw it, you pay a penalty,
Mhm.
25% tax.
And then you have to reinvest it as well.
You want to take your RSP, because it's a deferred tax. No, what I'm saying is that before this, it's a deferred tax. You haven't paid the tax yet, but you pay the tax when you are not 55, 65 years.
Okay.
So if you withdraw the money before 65, now the bank, you need to pay that tax that you did not pay, and then you pay the penalty. But then now the government came and said that you don't have to, as far as you have an RSP, you can go and take this money without going through this penalty that has like more
Yeah.
home purchase, right? If they're for a home purchase.
I think, yeah, I think there might be a bit of differences here between like pensions, RSP, and then this FHSA. I think we might have touched on all three of those right now. But for simplicity, I'm more so talking about your investment for retirement. I don't have anything in here for buying your first home. But that is definitely something that obviously you need to save up for if you want to be getting one. And that sounds like an amazing plan. So I would definitely take advantage of the FHSA. Okay, I think I got all of that. So after minimizing taxes, then you want to think about minimizing fees. This one is kind of a personal take. So don't trust me as being like the expert because I'm not a financial planner. However, this is something that I feel pretty strong about, but it's just an opinion. It's not, there's not an absolute right or wrong to this direction. It's more so your beliefs will direct how you invest in this. So I mentioned mutual funds. You can technically have a mutual fund and an ETF that have very, very similar plans and goals and aspirations. But the way they're managed is the big difference. So a mutual fund is actively managed. There's a bunch of nerds in an office somewhere calculating and finding the best assets and calling up buy, sell. So that's those guys. And because there's so many nerds, they cost a lot of money. Their salaries are massive. And they also get massive bonuses. Whenever you make money, they make money. So that's supposed to incentivize them to do the right thing, right? But they still make a lot more than you do. So, and also if they lose all your money, they still make money, which seems a little bit weird. But anyways, the active management side is very expensive. So on an investment, a standard mutual fund, 1.5 to 2.8% is a pretty big spread. Canada has some of the highest mutual fund fees in the industry in the world. Ours are averaging closer to 2.2%. That if you work with a bank like RBC, BMO, that kind of stuff, they're very, very high. And I'll show you in a graph soon. You know, I like graphs. How much this is going to erode your returns over time. So if you think about an asset manager, you know, targeting a 10% rate of return, if he's charging you 2.8%, how much do you get after it's all said and done? You're getting like 7.2%. So he is taking off the top from everything that you make. So, you know, some asset managers are brilliant and they actually do make more money than the market, but it's exceptionally rare. Only 12%. This is from a study by the the Dow Jones Industrial Average. They do like a survey of mutual funds twice a year, and they found that 12% of actively managed funds were actually able to make more than the stock index, which means you just put your money in this blind ETF and did nothing, and nobody made any decisions. The market went like this, the mutual fund went like this, and ended up lower than, ended up lower than the market. So you paid these nerds, and they actually lost you money. 88% of the time, that's what happened. 88% of the time, they lost money. Not lost money, they did not beat the market. So what's the point? That's kind of my philosophy. Again, this is a personal take. Obviously, this is a multi-trillion-dollar market, so there's a lot of people that believe in it. Just my buddy Warren Buffett kind of agrees with me. So when you're looking at a mutual fund, if you're thinking about investing in a mutual fund, I just advise you to ask your investment manager, whoever is giving you this advice, what is the return before and after the fee? It's called an MER, management expense ratio. And they might not want to tell you, or if they're good, they'll just be like, oh yeah, this is it. And I've been showing you the after fee return this whole time. And sometimes that's the case, and that's great. The other thing to consider though is how long has this fund been beating the market for? They'll say, oh, from 2020 when the market crashed till now, these guys have been beating the market. Well, that's actually not super hard to do. If you looked at what the Fed was doing, pumping trillions of dollars into the industries and printing money and lowering interest rates, I could have made a ton of money if I had somebody else's bucket load of cash to do it with. So look at the timing. It must be 10 years at least. If they have not been beating the market over a 10-year average, don't believe that they're going to beat the market tomorrow, because there's not enough time for a full cycle to go through in less than 10 years. You know, there's all those booms and busts. That's you want to capture all of that. Exchange traded funds. The fees that these charge are 100 times lower, 0.02% to 0.5%. So that's a pretty huge spread. But the ones that I'm investing in, they're 0.03%, like extremely small. And yes, they're technically coming off your return, but they're so much smaller as long as you believe in the plan that the ETF is setting out. So these funds, like I said before, they just set rules. They don't have people managing every day. They just set a rule. If this, then that. And there's no decision. And that way it can be automated. They have a lot of machines and programs doing this and not a lot of humans. So it's much, much cheaper. But good or bad, no matter what the market does, they stick to their rule. And that's it. So that's why they're cheaper. So this, again, thank you, Chris. This is a simulation that he built showing if you put $10,000, I believe this is over, oh, I don't have the time horizon here. I think this might have been 25 years or something. But if you put $10,000 in at the beginning and the market on average returns 7% over this time, and the mutual fund returned 8.5%. So in this scenario, which only 12% of the time is true, the mutual fund beat the market by 1.5%. Very good job. The nerds earned their pay. But after the mutual fund fees, you're here. So these guys made more money. The fund overall returned a higher return than the market, but the managers took not most, but took a lot of your returns. And because of the rule of compounding interest that I talked to you guys about, as your investment grows, you get more growth on the growth, and then you get growth on the growth on the growth. Kind of like, no, I won't say. But they're, yeah, it's like gaining weight. So over here, you can see right away when this starts to pull away, the blue line starts to pull away from the orange, it's basically over already. Because now every year they're working with more money and more money and more money. And that just compounds over the course of 20 years. And this is why I feel so strongly about ETFs. And so I just urge you, if you're only invested in mutual funds, just at least read into it. Don't take my word for it. Do a little bit of reading about what an ETF is. I don't want to give any individual names, but the most popular things that people invest in here are just index funds. So if you've ever heard about the TSX, that's the Canada's largest 100 companies, is it? I think something like that. The S&P 500 is the United States' largest 500 companies. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, that's it's a certain segment of, I think, 100 companies. And there's the NASDAQ, that's high tech, more tech focused companies. So basically those indexes have already done all the work for you. They have put together a list of the top blah companies for blah reason, insert name here. And you can just, for 0.03% fee, you can just put all your money into, the ETFs that you believe in, and they're diversified. If you're buying into an index fund, they're somewhat diversified because like the S&P 500 is 500 of the largest companies in the United States. They're diversified, they are a low fee, and then you can use these in your TFSA or your RSP or probably your FHSA. So they're quite flexible. And if you're just, picking individual stocks, or you're only buying mutual funds, or you're only using a savings account, you could be leaving quite a bit of return on the table over the course of, 20 years or whatever. Yes.
So when you're investing, do you want to look for a fund that pays dividends?
So she asked, if you're investing, do you want to look for a fund that pays dividends? And I would say it depends on your stage of life, where you are. I'm still relatively early in my process, I would say. I'm not too worried about dividends myself. I'm more interested in growth. So if I can get a fund that gives me, a 5% dividend or a fund that gives me 7% growth, I would rather take the growth because I don't need income at this stage. However, if you're anywhere, if you're within 10 years of retirement, I think dividends become more important than growth because you're going to get a fixed income off of these. Most companies will not reduce their dividends. It's a death note to their value if they reduce dividends. So they always want to maintain or grow dividends over time. And you can live off of those dividends. A dividend is basically at the end of a quarter or a fiscal year. The companies who do declare dividends, they're like banks. A lot of these lower growth but more stable value stocks, I think is what they're called, they can declare a dividend. And that dividend goes straight to shareholders. So if you own 500 shares and they declare like a 2-cent dividend, you get 1,000 cents. But over hundreds and thousands of shares that somebody might own, that can be your entire income. So you can retire on only dividend income. You get taxed differently as well. There's different taxes for dividend income, which I don't understand well enough to talk about. But does that kind of answer your question? I think it depends a little bit on what age you are or how far from retirement you are. I do believe, though, everybody should have a little bit of everything. At the end of the day, you should have a mix. That's what diversification is all about. If you only have growth stocks and then the market collapses, you collapse with it. So having a little bit of more stable dividend fixed income can definitely shield you from that. Okay, I think I'm done with all my pretty graphs. Just a couple more slides here. So the next point was consistency. So consistent monthly contributions. We talked about making an automatic transfer from your account. So personally, we have different investments going to different things. They're all automatic. But in the last 2 years or so, I set up a Wealthsimple account, and I love it. Honestly, it's so easy to use. There's many other apps out there like Questrade. I don't know if Robinhood is good for Canada or not, but no. And there's another big one in Canada. I can't remember the name of.
IBK.
Sorry?
IBKR?
That might be it. IBKR. Anyways, if you're in Canada and you're using an app, like you want to have a Canadian, not a chartered bank, but you want to have it be in a Canadian institution, because in Canada we have deposit insurance for $250,000 of your bank balance is insured by the government. So if you're downloading an app that is international, A, you're probably going to have to fund it with US dollars or a different currency, and then B, you don't get the deposit protection insurance. But anyways, for Wealthsimple, I don't use it for banking at all. I have an automatic transfer coming out into certain ETFs there. And what I personally love about it is it's so easy to just like pull up my phone any time of day, and I can just pop and see the market went up. What's my investment doing? Okay, I can see it. That's pretty cool. But for some people that can be a negative, because if you have access to it, you might be tempted to tinker, and be consistent. Don't panic when the market crashes. Don't sell in a crash. If you are, 5+ years from retirement, please do not react to a market crash. It's a good thing for you if you're not selling. So think about it. If you're doing the next bullet point here is called dollar cost averaging. I'll kind of give you a scenario to explain it. If you're investing, like in our example, $416 a month, and the market crashes, and you're still investing $416 a month, what do you think is happening to your investment? Say you're buying shares that cost $100 a share, and then the market crashes to $50 a share. You're buying twice as many shares. And if you're not selling in the next few years, who cares? Keep buying at that lower rate. You're literally getting a sale. So don't sell in the middle of a crash market. It's not, it's generally nearly impossible to time the market. That's what the nerds are trying to do. And 88% of the time, the very, very well-paid, very, very well-educated people cannot do it. So I don't think I have a chance. Maybe you have an anointing, or you have an inside loop or something. And like that's, I think if you understand the industry very, very well, like Brother Mervyn knows a lot about oil and gas. He's probably one of the very few people that could actually predict and time things in his industry. Because if you have a super solid connection with the value of your industry, you can probably do a lot better than most other people can in that same industry. For me though, I don't understand any industry well enough to make stock picks. So I just go into the index. And when the index crashes, I just keep buying because I'm not selling. So I don't really, I'm not worried about it at all. And when it goes up, I'm not really selling either. Some people buy more in a hot market. And I understand the emotional aspect of that because like, oh, it's going up, I want to get in. But if you're not selling, you're now paying a premium. And you don't know if that market's going to slide down tomorrow. Like if you look at the last 5 years, speaking of which, this is from 2014 to 2023. Look at all these crashes and valleys and mountains. There are a million reasons to sell. Here's 31 of them. So US stocks flat for 20 months. That happened here. Look what happened right after that. So if you would have sold because you were depressed about the flat market, you would have lost all this return. Or what about if you bought at the top of this peak because, oh, the market's hot, it's going up, I better buy in, and then it goes down. It's better generally, safer to just have a budget for how much you're going to invest and just stick to your plan. Unless you're investing into a specific niche market that could go away forever. Like if you're really into AI and then the world finds out, oh shoot, AI is not actually worth what we thought it was. That's the only time you might actually be a bit uncomfortable with market crashes because you could lose everything. Like if you're in Enron in the turn of the century, that was a bad day. But look at this. Russian-Ukraine war happened here. And look how much, like everybody thought this is gonna drag down the market. Commodities are gonna go through the roof. Energy is gonna be unaffordable for everybody. My utilities now are cheaper than they've ever been. And obviously I don't live in Europe, so I'm much more shielded than they are. But the point is there's bad news almost every single day. And this is only a 10-year cycle. So believe that if you invest for 10 years, you're gonna see your money go down many, many times. Just don't panic, stick to your plan and see it through. Going back for 1 second, I like this idea, making a game out of investing. So if you have a hard time putting money away consistently, I think it could be an interesting concept, especially maybe if you have children, to incentivize them. Like, you know, once you maybe set a quarterly or an annual goal or something like that, and you say, hey, if you invest, or if you're talking to yourself, if you make all the rules yourself, if I invest $200 a month for 3 months in a row, I get to go buy a new pair of shoes, or I get to add $50 a month to my eating out budget this month. And you can like, you know, if you've got the cash, you can afford it because you've been so good to your future. So I really like this idea. If somebody's having a hard time just getting started, I think this could be a good way to just kind of give yourself a little bit of a kick in the pants and make it fun. This is maybe a bit controversial, but this is something that mom and dad's financial planner told me a long, long time ago. And it just is kind of trying to tap into human nature and your own personal psyche. And he actually said, if you're having a hard time investing, borrow a little bit of money to pay for something other than investing, and then invest the money you were going to use for that. So don't leverage your investing because that's risky and very dangerous. But for example, we had, you know, like things coming up. We had a line of credit, and we were trying to decide if we could afford to buy, like, I think a certain amount of life insurance for me and maybe some investments, because I had a car that was kind of on the fritz. So instead of, I was thinking I can't really afford to commit to investing because I don't want to start and stop. Once I start, I never want to stop. I just want to leave that money and keep it going in there every month. But I didn't want to because of my car. So he said, well, you sound like the kind of person who doesn't let debt get out of control. And if this is you, this might be applicable. If not, stay away. But I am that way. If I see debt, I'm just crushing it as soon as I can. I'm pulling out, you know, personal spending. I'm pulling out entertainment. I'm pulling out a lot of like travel, everything. I'm going to cut my cost until I get rid of that debt. And so what we did was I ended up committing to this investment. And then when the car needed a fix, I used my line of credit for like the $300 part or whatever it was. And I crushed that. Like within a couple months, I got rid of it. But it allowed me to kind of get into this habit. And, you know, over time, we got a little bit of an emergency account. And you know how it is, like unexpected stuff comes up. And instead of robbing my investment account, instead of stopping my investment, when COVID happened, this happened to me. I lost about 80% of my income in 1 week, and it was gone for like 6-7 months. It was extremely dire. And so we stopped everything. We stopped our mortgage payment. We stopped our utilities payment. We called our phone company. We called everybody we owed money to, and they allowed us to stop payments indefinitely until I had work again. And the one thing we didn't stop was investing. And that was just because of the principle of how hard it is to restart an optional payment. If it's optional, you'll always find a reason to option out because you want to have something else or something else goes wrong. But I knew I had to pay my phone bill eventually. I knew my mortgage was going to need to be paid. And that's why we paused those things. We definitely could have paused our investments that we're fully within our rights to. But I pulled strings to make my debt pause. And I paid interest on them. I had to keep paying interest on those debts. But I think the principle was, force yourself, find a way. If you know yourself, if you know what makes you tick, find a way to manipulate your mindset to get into investing on a consistent basis, and just don't let it stop. If something comes up, try to find something else to cut. Obviously, if you're in a really bad place, you don't want to be living on credit cards and lines of credit because you're still investing. You're going backwards at that point. But within reason. I just wanted to throw that out there as making a game out of it. Also manipulate yourself to make sure you're investing. So I don't want to get into this too much. This is super high level, but just really, really briefly touching on these. I've mentioned a few times that you should change your investment over time. So when you're living at home, save as much as you can. Use that first home savings account, FHSA. Save for marriage. If you want to be able to get engaged to somebody or something like that, there's a lot of cost, believe me, for that transaction. And then of course there's retirement as well. But when you're living at home, you're not only thinking about your long-term future. You have short-term goals that you need to fit. You need to probably get a car. You need to get a house of some sort or rent a house. You need 1 month of rent in advance before you start renting. So that's almost a couple grand these days. So what I'm trying to say is, don't be spending all your money on food and games and clothes. Make it minimum 20% if you're living at home. I think that should be the absolute minimum personally. And if you're only making like $50 a month, well, then you don't have a lot of money to spend. Get a job. But when you're living at home, I don't think there's many excuses to spend all your money. I think it's quite wasteful. And be good to your future. When you're 5 years down the road, you're going to be so happy that you can afford to do things and that you can afford to get into maybe a house or something like that. I should really have Andy and Ben talk about this. I remember when you guys were saving every penny that you found. Yeah, these guys were saving 99% of their income. It was remarkable. You still do? No, maybe sometimes. No. Oh man. So next, living at home. You might still be living at home at this point, but it's a different phase when you're not at school anymore. When you have a career, you have a full-time job. If you're still living at home and you have a full-time job, boost your savings up way much. I would say try to do some math with yourself to find out. I was making $200 a month casually while I was in school. Now I'm making $2,000 a month somehow with my job. Save $1,800 of that or something. Give yourself 100% of your pre-career income as spending money just for fun. But please do not just go buying cars and all that kind of stuff right away. There are principles, I think, that we talked about in our first presentation about how much of your income you should spend on your first car. There's good principles to put in place to keep yourself under control. And if you just kind of become a person of principles, it doesn't matter how much you're making or spending because your principles will guide your decisions every step of the way. But if you're not living at home and you're in your early career, I think you should just kind of try to hit that 10%. Like 99% of people aren't doing that. So you are in the like way at the very top if you're investing 10% of your income. But it's not that hard. It's not impossible to do. It is hard to do when you're in your early career, but it's not impossible. So try to invest 10%. I would personally say growth stocks are likely what you're looking for, something that's going to grow with the market and not be super stable because you've got so much time to recover. And like I said, if it crashes, keep buying it on sale. As long as you believe that it will eventually recover, then that's what you're looking for. So when you're early in your career, you can afford to take a lot of risk with your investments. I'm not saying to bet the farm on something that could go to zero. I'm just saying to get into investments that are more like this, but are going up over time. Same with your career. You can try something, be creative, do something entrepreneurial, or take a risky job that you think, might not work out, but it's challenging and exciting and could pay off. Once you are in your mid-career, I would say try to invest. If you want to retire with the same lifestyle you have now, in your mid-career, you need to be closer to 15% of your income, net income. If you expect that you're going to be able to cut your lifestyle when you retire, then you can stick at 10%. And again, you're still looking for always a diverse portfolio, but probably growth is still your primary motive. A little bit more of the value as well, like the dividend stocks. Late career, in your 50s, keep investing, try to keep it around that 15% again, and reduce your risk. So this is where you're starting to go a little bit closer to value stocks and fixed income. And then pre-retirement, transition. Again, this is just my personal feelings. I think if you're in your pre-retirement, you should definitely have an investment planner or a guide, some professional who's helping you plan for how you're going to withdraw your income when you retire. This is just a benchmark guideline. It's not at all like a good fit for everyone. But start to transition approximately 60% of your existing investments into low risk, because now you're at the point where very soon you will not have income anymore. You'll be on a fixed income based on what you saved. And if you're still in risky stuff and you need to go buy groceries tomorrow and your Bitcoin crashes, well, so much for your groceries. So start to get into more steady investments. They're not going to grow very much, but they're going to be there for you. And then once you're in your retirement, you're truly on a fixed income. You cannot recoup any losses. Keep your investments consistent and never risk your principal. I've been close to some really, really awful stories when I was working at the bank of people who thought this was a great opportunity. Their grandson gave them a tip or asked them to invest, and they lost, like the last 5 years of their life's income in this investment. How do you live? I don't know. Like you're going on welfare at that point because you risked your principal. Much, much better to, go to the food bank once in a while and have a lower income that you understand than to risk it on something that is unlikely to pay off and could in fact lose you everything. Last point, these are things I didn't want to get into today, but things you should probably consider if you're a little bit later in your investment planning. If you're looking at real estate, that's a whole nother topic. How do you start to invest in real estate? There's actually quite a few real estate investors in the church. Well, quite a few. There's a handful. So like if you're looking for any advice or input, there are people that you can talk to in the message. How much do you need to retire? This is a topic I didn't want to get into today just because it takes some time, but it is something, if people want, I could do another session. I don't feel like it's going to cause a lot of hazed eyes in the young people. But if you know how much you need to retire, you can understand how much you need to invest today. And so Crystal and I started with this. We didn't know. We talked to an investment planner and we made something up. But it gave us a goal and a guide. And that 10% is a good baseline if you don't know. but you can get much more accurate if you plan it out. Something we didn't talk about at all, how does old age security and Canada Pension Plan impact your savings? There's a lot of different timings. You can start to take those out at 65, or if you delay it to 70, they go up. Why should you or when should you? Things to think about. Is your bank or investment advisor trustworthy to help you invest? I just put this in there because the easiest way to invest is to go to your banker, just like any retail bank, and say, I have $500 to invest. They'll put you down with somebody else, and he or she will say, hey, this looks good. Or they'll ask you questions like how much risk you can take and that kind of stuff. And then they'll recommend something for you. They have a fiduciary duty to recommend the best advice for you. How many times does that happen? I worked in a bank, and trust me, they are not in it for you. They are there to make their sales targets. And every month there's a new flavor that has the highest return for them. And they will try to find a way to fit your square peg in the round hole until it works. And, there's great bankers. There's a lot of very, very honest, really sincere people out there. Generally, they have some gray hair though. Like if you're working with a young banker, chances are they just want to hit their target and become the salesperson of the month or something like that. And it's really sad because I would say, I don't know, I don't have a number, but I would guess that it has to be the vast majority of people are investing through their bank. And they just don't really understand you well enough or care. They're trying to hit their own sales targets. Everybody that sells you something makes something off of it. Just remember that and be skeptical. I'm not saying your person is a liar. I'm just saying be a little bit skeptical whenever they advise you something. Challenge them a little bit. Should you borrow money for leverage investing? Very likely not. But there are some scenarios, i.e. real estate, business, other ventures where it could make sense. And then should you buy life insurance? And if yes, what type of insurance should you be getting into? So these are all questions that I would say, if you've never thought about these, do take some time to think. And it just starts by tomorrow morning, send an email to somebody you know. Just pick a topic and send somebody an email asking, hey, how do I start this conversation? And they'll give you some info. If you don't know anybody, ask somebody you know, hey, do you know somebody who could help me out with insurance or whatever? Because referrals are always a little bit safer than just calling somebody randomly or going off a social media ad. Finally, remember, wherefore, if God so clothed the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. Your heavenly Father knows that you have need of these things, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. All right, that is it. Does anybody want Q&A or should we just? Sure, okay, Brother.
I don't do a lot of investing. I have very limited knowledge and timing as well. But so for a person like me who's not using any bank or any like self-directed, I was hoping you would just like throw out some suggestions and names. You are not to blame for it.
Thank you.
Some hints, something.
Yeah, so Brother Emmanuel was just asking, for somebody who doesn't have any ideas to where to start for investing and you don't have a banker or an investment advisor, he just asked if I could throw out a name of something, some asset that you could maybe look at. So personally, I'm probably putting around like 50% of my new money into just an S&P 500 index. So that graph that I showed you, this has happened like the last 10 years, all the bad news and reasons you should sell, that was the S&P 500.
Okay.
So I would highly advise looking at an ETF, exchange traded fund for the S&P 500, and just understand what it is if you're interested in investing in it. For younger people who are maybe have more time and or more risk appetite, the Nasdaq is a very similar index, but it's heavily weighted towards technology stocks that grow way faster but also crash harder. The TSX index is the Canadian version, and Canada just has, we're very exposed to resources. I think oil and gas is like 20% of those companies or something in the TSX. It's quite high. So if you want to be invested in Canadian stuff, or if you have more faith in the energy sector, then after that, I would probably look at just like really conservative things. Like if you want more safety, these are all the ones that I just mentioned are very like volatile, but they represent the whole market. So over time, unless we go into apocalypse, they will continue to go up. So barring those, I would probably look at some like, I don't have a specific name off the top of my head, but like a value fund or a value ETF. And these will be ETFs with, again, very low fees that track an index that is more focused on like banks. Like you can do a bank ETF. It buys like all the banks in North America and holds them. And banks are stereotypically very stable. They go up very slowly, but they don't go down. So that's kind of where I would start.
So you don't do individual
None.
names.
I don't do any individual stocks. No, I'm not smart enough for that. I lost a lot of money at the beginning when I did that.
Okay, that's smart.
VXUS.
I forget what they were even. I
Not even by Mervin's thing.
No, once I learned Brother Mervin was getting promoted, I sold everything.
All right.
No, but I don't have any individual stocks.
No.
I saw, I saw questions being.
Here's your mic.
Just hold it near your face, I guess.
Is it a good choice to invest in, put money in both RRSP and TFSA?
Yeah, I think especially when you're starting out, the question was, is it good to put money in a TFSA and an RSP? And that's a pretty complicated discussion as to which one is better. And if you don't know which one is better for you because of, I don't know which one's better for me. Personally, I think right now my income is fairly high, so my taxes are fairly high. I don't think I'll be making this much necessarily when I'm retired. So for me now, I'm transitioning more into RSPs at the moment, only because I don't think I'll have this much income when I'm retired. So for somebody who doesn't know though, like for you at your age, I would probably say a tax-free savings account, because your income is likely not high enough that you're going to be triggering a lot of taxes anyways. So if you invest into an RSP and your tax bill at the end of an entire year is, $500, and you invest into an RSP, like you cannot possibly get 100% of your taxes back. So the most you're going to get is maybe $100 or so. So I think that is not as valuable to somebody who's younger. Once your taxes start to get into like the thousands or tens of thousands, that's when RSPs become pretty powerful, because you can do what I talked about here, where you reinvest your return.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
What's the age for RSP investing?
I think you have to be 18 for either TFSA,
18 or
any registered investment.
14 or
I think I just lost my mic.
Is it 18?
Check.
Yeah.
18, yeah.
Yeah, and that's another point too, with the children that are under 18 years old. I think they don't pay taxes until you're 18 or something like that.
Well,
So they should look into it, because they can really invest that money into your TFSAs. And I think you're allowed $6,500 a year or something in your TFSAs, but they can really gain a lot of investment room by investing when they don't have to pay taxes. Or do you pay taxes if you're over 18,000 a year or 20,
yeah.
30,000? There's a lot of
it's,
room in there for young ones to make money and not be paying taxes and investing money.
Just one clarification, you don't get TFSA room until you're 18.
Yes.
So you
Okay.
after you turn 18, you start accruing whatever the annual limit is. I think there was 7,500 this year, maybe. So for me, I was 18 when they started, so I have $95,000 of contribution room. I did have a note in there. I didn't make a big deal out of it, but for RSPs and TFSAs, you need to check your contribution limits before you start, and that'll be on your tax return. So if you have not gotten a tax return yet, you don't have any contribution room in either, unless you're 18 and for some reason have never had a tax bill. So when you're paying taxes, you'll have a RSP contribution limit that'll show up on your T4, I think it is, or maybe your T1. Okay, yeah, and then your TFSA every year, regardless of if you make money or not. Once you're 18, you get contribution room every single year. So like guys like Daniel and Miles, you probably have like, you know, $30,000-$40,000 of contribution room or something like that in your and they're maxed out, I believe, right?
Almost.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and I don't know what the minimum income is for taxes. I feel like you have 18,000 before you start paying taxes, something like that. Like it's not very, very high, but once you start making, you know, basically more than $1,200 a month, you'll probably start to have a tax bill. Did you have a question, Sister Amber?
I'm just wondering who you would suggest for, like what companies, well, Simply was mentioned, what are some of the other options to get into the ETFs?
Yeah, so for
How-
ETFs, that's a good question, because as with anything, there are some ETFs that are just so small, there's so little money in them, that there is a chance that everybody just pulls out. And like, it's not like you would lose all your money, they would have to redistribute, I believe. I'm not certain exactly how those work, but I would stick to big names personally. So Vanguard is a big distributor of ETFs. BlackRock,
Okay.
Bank of Montreal. There are certainly others, but I guarantee you in those three companies, they will have every ETF under the sun. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of ETFs. So, and like for the ones that I mentioned, like the S&P 500, there's probably 50 variants of the exact same thing, just managed by different companies because they have slightly different fees, or maybe they redistribute at a different time of month.
Okay.
Very, very small differences. But, you know, if I was comparing, if say I wanted to get the ETF for S&P 500, and I was saying, which one do I get? I would look at the lowest fee with the highest